Canal del Congreso, el canal de la Unión. Presenta.
Hola, bienvenidos a Pesos y Contrapesos, el programa de la Auditoría Superior de la Federación y el canal del Congreso. El día de hoy tenemos un programa muy especial. La GAO, o Government Accountability Office, es el equivalente de la Auditoría Superior de la Federación en el Congreso de Estados Unidos, el órgano encargado de fiscalizar cómo se ejercen los recursos que los contribuyentes norteamericanos entregan al gobierno de su país. Tenemos el gusto de contar con la presencia de Janet Franzel. Ella es directora general de aseguramiento financiero de la GAO. Bienvenida, Janet.
Gracias.
Y también contamos con la presencia del señor Benjamin Nelson. Él es director de calidad y mejora continua de la GAO. Benjamin, welcome to Pesos y Contrapesos.
Thank you.
Janet, if we could start explaining to the Mexican audience, what is the GAO, which is their main institutional mission?
Well, the GAO is a member of the legislative branch of the government in the United States, and GAO works for Congress, very similar to the Auditoría Superior here, and we are the independent audit organization of the U.S. government.
Basically, we help the Congress improve the performance of government operations for the benefit of the American people. We do so by carrying out a range of audit and investigative type activities. We also make recommendations from our work to the Congress, to the head of agencies, to help them improve the way services are delivered. Our goal is to either improve the efficiency, the effectiveness, or to identify ways to reduce the cost of government.
And the way we do our work is we do this work in the form of financial audits, performance audits, investigations, and legal opinions. And we have 13 different teams with expertise in GAO. Some of the teams are subject area experts, such as teams in healthcare, defense, education, homeland security, etc. We also have teams that have technical expertise, such as my team. We have expertise in financial management. Mm-hmm. And so my team does financial audits of large entities in the United States, large government entities. We do the government-wide audit of the U.S. government and some of the largest and most complex components of the government, such as the Internal Revenue Service, the Bureau of the Public Debt, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the Troubled Asset Relief Program, which was set up to deal with the recent financial crisis.
Benjamin, I find the title very interesting, Director of Quality and Continuous Improvement, we could say. What's your office do? What's your interaction with the U.S. government?
My office is dedicated to quality. The people in my office assure that we have well-developed policies, that those policies are consistent with standards, that our people are well-trained, and that those policies are executed on each and every GAO audit. It is those audits that allow us to provide the Congress with information that has proven to be above reproach. Even in the worst of political environments, our work has stood the test.
We are known as the honest broker in Washington, D.C.
And how does the Congress use the information you provide to them?
The Congress uses the information we provide to fulfill its constitutional responsibility of overseeing the executive branch and overseeing specific programs and operations of the federal government. And the Congress also uses that information when making decisions about funding and program design and operations.
Here in Mexico, as in the U.S., we have a bicameral Congress, a Senate, and we don't call it a Chamber of Representatives, Chamber of Deputies. But the auditoría depends exclusively on the Chamber of Deputies. Does it happen the same in the U.S.?
It is slightly different in the U.S. The GAO receives requests from committees of Congress, subcommittees of Congress, as well as individual congresspersons. We have a very transparent system for establishing priorities among those three groups, as we currently are in a situation where there is an imbalance between the demand for our services and the staff available to complete audits. So we have a very broad clientele for our work, and members of Congress will use GAO's work to either hold an agency more accountable for achieving outcomes, or they may ask GAO to assist in drafting legislation or suggestions for policy changes.
Now, we do get those requests from both the House of Representatives and the Senate. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, oftentimes laws will be passed with requirements for GAO to conduct certain audits and studies. So we have a lot of demand for our work, and we can be requested to do work through many different means.
And the audits and research performed by the GAO is done at the end of the budgeting cycle once the money is spent, or it could be done during the program exercise?
In this manner, we are different from the Auditoría Superior. It can be done at any time. So in some cases, we evaluate program operations as they are occurring to evaluate the effectiveness of controls over the spending as it is happening. Sometimes we look at it after the fact, and in other cases we are forward-looking. We evaluate a program and determine options for improvements going forward.
Which is the kind of input that the GAO gives to the U.S. government?
The inputs that we give are fact-based, objective analyses of governmental programs. We are among the few agencies with the capability to provide real assessments of government performance without, as Jeanette said earlier, a political interest. Over the years, our work has been viewed as the gold standard for information and analysis on the operations of the federal government.
The other very important input that we provide is we are able to mobilize very quickly in times of national crisis or with significant issues that arise. So, for instance, in the last few years, we've been able to mobilize teams to really help promote confidence when the financial markets were in crisis and the federal government took actions in response to the financial markets crisis. GAO was asked to continually monitor the activities of the U.S. Treasury and the Troubled Asset Relief Program and to issue reports every 60 days on that activity. And then after that, when we had the economic recession, the federal government provided financial assistance to the states, and GAO was asked to monitor the states' use of those funds and provide reports every 60 days. So we are able to mobilize very quickly, not only to do the traditional work, but to do very late-breaking work in times of emergency or crisis, or just issues that become important to the country.
There are also instances where GAO is able to, based on our experience and the skill that we have, we are able to identify emerging threats that have a financial impact on the federal government, and we're able to articulate those threats in a clear and coherent manner, which then facilitates the Congress actually addressing some of these emerging issues.
Could you give us an example of this kind of threats?
One of the threats that we've identified is the threat associated with the risk associated with our financial institutions. We had alerted the Congress, although no one could have predicted the severity of the most recent financial crisis, but we had warned the Congress about a fragmented oversight structure as well as some of the risks that our financial institutions were incurring without the appropriate risk management techniques.
We also issue a high-risk series every 2 years where we identify the greatest risks that either are already present in government programs or that are facing the country, as Ben mentioned. And so we just issued our most recent high-risk series in January of this year. So each 2 years we look at the current risks, and sometimes we add new areas of risk, and sometimes we remove areas.
Do you remember an example that the U.S. government has changed some policy because of a recommendation from the GAO?
Oh, there are many, many. We make about 2,000 recommendations a year, and about 80% of those get implemented within 5 years.
Wow, that's very successful.
So it's very
rate,
significant.
right? Yeah.
Right. Another recommendation relates to payments or fees for physicians who provide medical care for indigent individuals. Due to our work, the Congress has significantly changed the way that physicians are reimbursed for the services. Prior to our work, there were very few controls and few incentives for that care to be delivered efficiently, and as well, there was very little control over the billings for the services rendered. So as a result of our work, Congress put restrictions on the way that physicians are reimbursed.
Another very good example is the U.S. Postal Service. A number of years ago, GAO put the U.S. Postal Service on the high-risk list because it did not appear that it would be financially sustainable. With increased use of electronic media and email and decreased use of first-class mail, the profitability of the Postal Service was in decline, but there was a high level of fixed expenses. So we were able to do that analysis and put that message out. And the Postal Service has been going through a series of reforms and continues to do so to be viable in the future in the United States.
Reading in the press now, there's a huge debate in the U.S. about the government debt. Has the GAO provided any suggestions or advice on how to deal with this financial challenge?
Well, we have been calling attention to the long-term sustainability of social programs for years. So, for instance, this is an example of our forward-looking work where we would project under current law if these programs were to continue.
Which would be the most important social programs?
The biggest social programs that are contributing to the imbalance are Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. And so
these are like providing medical services for elderly people and poor people.
Correct. And so that's an example of an area where we were really looking forward and warning the Congress. And it's that plus other unsustainable spending is contributing to our debt. And GAO also monitors very closely the debt levels. We report every year on the consolidated audit of the financial statements of the U.S. government what the current debt levels are. And we have an emphasis paragraph in our audit report about the seriousness of the issues of increasing debt. And we project also what will happen to the debt levels if certain changes are not made.
This should have been one of the first questions in the interview. Could you provide us a bit of historical context, how the GAO was designed and the historical process on how it was built upon today?
Sure, very interesting question. Yes. The GAO got its start in 1921, following the end of the First World War. Congress was concerned about management of the federal budget and the run-up of a significant amount of debt. Things have a way of repeating themselves. And Congress wanted more oversight over federal spending, and thus the GAO was created. That the law creating GAO required that the President prepare a budget for submission to Congress and gave GAO the authority to examine the expenditures in the budget. Our office has evolved from largely a transaction-based voucher checking organization to an organization now where most of the resources are spent assessing impacts, cost, and effectiveness of government programs.
How was this transition, Janet, from voucher checking to assessing the impact of government policies?
Well, part of it was sheer necessity. As the government grew and there were more and more transactions, GAO couldn't vouch for every transaction. Financial auditing procedures in the United States also evolved, so it was much more efficient to do that type of work as a financial statement audit. And the Comptroller Generals over the years had a lot of foresight and developed the performance auditing methodologies and the projections and the foresight. So it really very visionary. When did the first
performance audit started to happen in the U.S.?
I believe it was under Comptroller General Stotts.
Yes, and that would have been in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s.
And then GAO also helped the INTOSI develop the concepts around performance auditing as well.
One of the good things about GAO is that we have been able to continually evolve to remain relevant. As the role of the federal government grew in social programs and in social aspects of life, education, health, safety, there was a need for an organization with the capacity to assess and evaluate those types of programs in terms of outcomes. Later on, the public became somewhat disenchanted about the effectiveness of programs, and that led to GAO focusing additional attention on the outcomes that programs were achieving rather than focusing on whether there was compliance with the rules governing the programs.
Which you would see like the future challenges that the GAO would have ahead in order to keep on evolving?
Well, I think our future challenge is, just like all government entities, our budget is constrained. And so as we have new demands on our time and new types of work coming in, we still have to have time to think and look forward to the future, and we have to be able to manage all of our work so that we can continue to be effective in the current work and to continue to evolve toward the future.
Your budget is approved by Congress?
Correct.
But you have like the last word in the budget request, or how does the negotiation go?
Our process goes through the normal appropriations process. The difference between us and the executive branch, of course, is our budget does not go through the executive branch. So our budget goes through the Congress, just like an agency's budget goes through the Congress.
What happens if the GAO puts forward a recommendation and the government does not pay attention to it?
That's highly unlikely to occur, that an agency would not in some way address a GAO recommendation. While we do not have legal authority to compel an agency to act on a GAO recommendation, the practical consequences of ignoring a GAO would likely be questions around the agency's budget, as well as having the leader of the agency come before the Congress to explain their reluctance to address a GAO recommendation.
It would be too costly politically for the head of the agency.
Yes, that's one way of saying it.
It would be difficult. I was recently in a situation that Ben just described where we had an agency, they were slow to respond to our recommendations, and these recommendations were made in 2008. And so a congressional committee decided to have a hearing to ask the head of that agency, what is the status of your actions on the GAO recommendations? And so the head of that agency and I were both testifying on that issue.
And how does the peer review process work between different audit institutions around the world?
Well, the peer review process is a concept where different organizations that are peers go in and review each other's quality assurance system. So it's almost like the auditors are auditing the auditors. And so this concept is also common in the private sector in the United States in the accounting profession, but around the world it is also being implemented with national audit offices. So for instance, GAO has a peer review. We've had numerous peer reviews where an international team comes in and reviews the effectiveness of our quality assurance process, and we're in the process now of, we did peer review of the performance audit practice of the Superior Audit Office in Mexico in 2008, and we are here now for some follow-up work.
Peer review is an excellent means by which you can provide assurance to your Congress, to your citizens, as well as to leadership of the organization, that the audits are being prepared in accordance with the standards. But to be effective, peer reviews must involve independence. We have created a structure whereby audit organizations cannot review each other, okay, to create a high degree of independence. They must be rigorous, and in order to be effective, the results should be made public. And these are the tenets of the current peer review arrangement. They can be costly to both the reviewed organization and the reviewing organizations, but they're worth it.
Could you tell us about the previous result of the peer review on the Auditoría Superior de la Federación?
Oh, sure. We completed our review in 2008. The review concluded with what we refer to in the accounting profession as a clean opinion, meaning no significant deviations from the standards that were used in the peer review. That's one of the tenets of peer review, is that the assessment is based on standards to provide some level of consistency. We did make some suggestions, and I believe we had 2 recommendations. We are here now, and what we've seen are significant enhancements that have been made over and above what existed at the time of the 2008 peer review.
Could you tell us how this process of change has gone, and if you had other peer review experience in other parts of the world?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me just reiterate what Ben said, that in 2008 we did conclude that the quality assurance system followed by the performance audit practice of the Superior Audit Office was effective for assuring quality of its audits. And so that was a clean opinion. We did have 2 recommendations and 2 suggestions. The recommendations were really surrounding annual training programs and capacity, as well as documentation of the audits themselves. We've been very impressed in our follow-up review to see the attention that has been paid to really improving, and like I said, it was a clean opinion, but to really increasing and enhancing the staff capacity and awareness toward quality. And so that's the perfect result. I mean, that's the reason that we do peer reviews internationally, is to help each other increase quality, because sometimes if you have another organization looking in, that organization can give suggestions. And we've had the same experiences at GAO. We get a clean opinion, but we receive the perspectives of our colleagues from around the world, which is very valuable to help us think about different ways of doing things and perhaps other efficiencies that we can put in place.
Staff from other Supreme Audit institutions visit the GAO and also perform like a peer review.
That's correct.
And which would be like the challenges in the future for Supreme Audit institutions? Like you talked about this transition to performance evaluation. From a more general perspective, how you see evolving these institutions in the future?
Well, when we work with our international colleagues, we do see many national audit offices making that transition from compliance auditing to performance auditing. And that is a difficult transition. Performance audits are very complex, and they require a lot of rigor in terms of analytical methods, statistical methods.
It's a different framework of mind.
That's right. And it all has to be valid. And so performance auditing is difficult, and that is a challenge for many national audit offices to make that transition, but it is a very necessary transition in today's world.
When other Supreme Audit institutions visit the GAO, which kind of suggestions were made to the performance or the evaluation to the GAO itself?
Well, in both of the performance audits, performance audit peer reviews that we've had to date, they both had suggestions. Both ended up with clean opinions, which, of course, we were very pleased about. But they both made suggestions. Those suggestions typically dealt with clarifying some of our decisions. They also made suggestions that since we perform a wide range of services for our Congress, we have a very, very broad mandate. Audits are one of the services that we provide to the Congress. The peer reviewers suggested that we take steps to make clear the distinction between the various types of products that we provide to the Congress.
Which are other kind of products you provide besides the audits?
We provide what we call non-audit services. We will do some limited amount of research for the Congress. We will assist them in analyzing budget submissions. And those are some of the key things that we do. But those are not considered to be audits within the standards that we use to govern our work. They do not have that level of assurance. One of the things you want to accomplish in an audit is a very high level of assurance that you have analyzed the facts correctly and that you have fair, reasonable, balanced conclusions and that you have been thorough in your examination. Many of these additional tasks that we perform do not require that level of effort and are not governed by the standards. So the peer reviewer suggested that we always make clear whether the work we are completing for the Congress is considered to be an audit and in compliance with the standards that we follow.
Supreme Audit's institutions should be very proud because I think institutions could learn from each other, countries could learn from each other, and this is an excellent practice. And thank you, Janet and Benjamin, for sharing your insights and your input and experience with the audience of Pesos y Contrapesos.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Pues muchas gracias por habernos acompañado en esta emisión muy especial de Pesos y Contrapesos. Le pedimos que se ponga en contacto con nosotros, que nos proponga temas para nuestras mesas de opinión o preguntas a través de las diversas formas de contacto. Puede ser por medio de la página de Internet de la Auditoría Superior de la Federación, www.asf.gov.mx, o mediante el correo electrónico asf@gov.mx o directamente al teléfono de la Auditoría Superior de la Federación 55 34 31 45. Muchas gracias por habernos acompañado en esta emisión de Pesos y Contrapesos. Lo esperamos para la próxima.
Canal del Congreso, el canal de la Unión, presentó.